Alright, let's try this again.
This is the Random Conspiracy Generator, a device which uses Nihilum 3B's penchant for extracting patterns. And there are patterns everywhere. And if this device found a pattern, it ain't from nowhere. And if we don't think it's a pattern, too bad. Nihilum 3B found it. It's a pattern, just like my Nihilum and my doubly claimed Toyota Corolla, which would have screwed me come tax time, and Nihilum 3B told me to go get both checked. And I'm glad I did. Here's a treat, 3B, for having my back. So yes, if you are ready to understand the secret collaborations of the world, press this button and the whole case will be blown wide open. Take your time, no rush. I just have to pick up my kid, who's doing the walking tour of the Bryan Singer compound for boys with eugenic powers. No worries, I have him a nice view on my Apple Watch at all times. He's in good hands. Seeing you balancing your options. Do you stay in blissful ignorance, or carry the burdens of those of us who know? With quivering fingers, you hesitantly press the button. The machine bathes you in light, and you are bombarded with liquid living data, which whispers in your ear the real, honest-to-God, why-would-lie truth. 6% of people on Earth will be out to get you if you threaten them, if you call them to question in front of friends, if you happen to have the very job they were wanting, or got in the way of their dreams of acting by having you. Think of it as millions of conspiracies of one that don't know they are collaborating. Many across the centuries have felt cabals were looking for the perfect moment to strike, but I'm afraid it is not that simple. The theory is that one of the first crossroads of human history is to work with small bands of folks to survive, or to tough it out as lone wolves. We chose teamwork, which enabled a whole suite of cognitive skill sets to develop, to enter into social contracts, to attune to another's mind, to act for the greater good even with no one looking to incentivize you, and to make simulations of other people in one's head in order to assess the needs of others in their absence. Those who did not possess these traits in the same intensity had other strengths: to become in danger, to read fluently body language, to think in the immediacy of one's feet. This might very well be the first difference. These folk comprise all walks of life at all ages, regardless of appearance and voice. The folk express invariant behaviors, containing overlapping ulterior motives. They likely are not working together to fuck your shit up. They never have meetings about you, but they likely possess a great cognitive resonance with each other. But the tendril of mind attuning to each other coordinates thoughts and actions, so that they each in their own way take steps to preserve a short-term stability. It's the conspiracy that conspires alone together, supporting each other's shady actions, ready to provide the illusion of gaslighty consensus, or provide women's services, such as choking yourself into unconsciousness with a jump rope so someone can have a heart-to-heart with a creditor who smells alcohol in your breath, and therefore latch onto their latest target. To become a villain, one must play a role in a scheme so outrageously monstrous, so physically abusive, so flagrantly bad that even an observer, if that person exists, has no reason to imagine any other mind in the universe being remotely capable of that kind of sick individualism. In the fictional villainous schemer's head, every action is mapped against another action. Until they think, this is going too far. My one vulnerability is being associated with this villain. My one vulnerability is getting caught by law enforcement, to whom they may implicate as well, so as to spread their illicit ideas. Where the villain does have a sufficient sense of entitlement. A schemer who thought that others exist for the benefit of his wants is unlikely to question those wants. However, an ethical schemer thinks more like, the problem for this one man is a problem for others, who care about the individual, and the situation would make anyone sick if they saw it unfold. This means that all others may not have my values and experiences. While the schemer believes, nobody actually gives a shit, and the schemer's worldview is based in how badly you really have it compared to the schemer. This worldview doesn't improve or degrade society overall. An example of a sociopath. An evil grand mastermind in the future would build a generation ship that somehow houses a gajillion people from the entire Earth like the blue planet from Lost in Space. Who doesn't love an evil genius? Just remember what happened on Lost in Space. So I say leave some space on that generation ship to conspire alone together. After being disincentivized, disrespected, and betrayed repeatedly, scheme-land villains wear one or more masks as their social costumes. Many villain archetypes possess no family values, doomer alert, but will arrange a little boy into their plot, for their plot is why they're a lead asset alert.
Is there any... Oh, yes, had a loot. No, you know what? Hold on. Let me slow it down a bit. Yes, alert.
In fact, their evil nature might very well be an inability to imagine that good actions exist in order to exhaust the contents of any cup. This may mean, contrary to your common belief, that some evil is rooted in honest, sensitive selflessness and decency. No asshole alert, not from fineness, as you think of it. Indeed, it's difficult for one not to look at this particular situation through the lens of other emotional imperatives such as anxiety and gratitude. Out of view, like an organ hidden away in a pocket of flesh, a prickly rose bush may well contain thorns not revealed by one's vantage point, but points invisible when you look in straight at it. To grasp its whole being, you would need to lie down flat upon it and spread your fingers over all points, where your mind attunement and tension will naturally drift away, the prickliness soothed away with its prickles. By virtue of a rough culture which recognizes good and bad action, our penchant for instinctive foreboding led many to imagine conspiracy against oneself, to turn the distasteful things other people do against each other to assuage guilt. Although human values often override our simpler forebodings, to whom are those values honest? A concept as noble as friendship requires that some kindness exists as the motivation of reciprocity. That cannot always be the case, but friendship as it exists now is largely founded on a memory of prehistoric hunting behaviors in the wilds. Why can't one be both a villain and an innocent hero in this case? Like other hunters and gatherers who aspire to social good and fitness, most of those in our generation, following the acquisition of basic instrumental values like not having to worry about your next meal or protection from those who want it, still harbor a fundamental innocence towards violence against the innocent. Yet all along there was a value-additive inclination to seize a valuable opportunity and work for those you respect, to show a sort of humor that remains latent within this mind space, in some places underwritten with some bits of formal manners, and sometimes inspired to follow another, if not smarter. Anyone with this innocent heroic strain can potentially become a villain, with some exposure to this externalized abuse, by default becoming more moral by seeing a string of life-crushing abuse happening before you, all while retaining this underlying innocent quality. I suggest this as an early warning sign against being a victim. Can you recall someone in your life acting mean with you? Perhaps as a youngster or teenager, would you call their motives aggressive and feel assaulted? Isolate someone you really cannot imagine hating enough to instigate your violence on them. Then see how they deal with something genuinely being stolen from them and justifiably wanted back. Now rewind to another time in their lives that someone probably abused them and how they felt about it, or if they got in trouble for it. Do the math. If it feels a lot like being under an endless boot, now consider what would you do if someone with less restraint pressed it harder on your own boot face. Just so, there may be someone acting out their true nature in another fashion. A scenario very similar to mine where one man wrongs me may have just as much of the same extremity within, but perhaps directed against the abusers, now from another person with less in-control moral aptitude. Maybe I should step back to make the reality check for me that the big boys don't become big enough that they are capable of criminal activities out of their control. If not, the threshold of critical mass of public responsibility where other people take steps to help them for what they think of as sick criminals might yet to happen, in which case they risk feeling that there's nothing in their immediate future, not even another warm day coming. That alone is sufficient motivation to act, as anyone has seen what can happen if someone goes down into an oceanic undersea trench. Rumors, death threats. You have to worry about the numbers you can control without disproportionately tipping into a shitty mental condition from your headspace of those who carry enough moral code to view the other extreme actions they take as against them and know why the victimization took place.
Mm-hmm.
Now they face a moral conundrum if their own specific actions are, in their minds, now against you. In which case you better have a quick apology plan for your retribution before they pull a gun. Or, to illustrate, just see your one-time antagonist friend that has previously tried to bully you on some social network, suddenly taking out some whack-ass knife and brandishing it at you after your cross-dressing mugging in front of the school cafeteria. Do not think to run in blind fear and injure an innocent in your desperation. Do not even run away from your school as they draw their weapon and aim, because there may be an entire landscape of motives behind such an act and no context. If they catch up and knock you down, feel no compulsion to crawl away seeing someone on your level threaten another. We aren't mere creatures, but facsimiles of whatever this emotion is in their psyche, this entropic thrust for dominion and ownership. It may just as well be an empire, or the modern euphemism of I. In order for you to trust they won't aim at an unintended mark, if you ever intend to wield any power against these predators, then it had better be fast, strong, and passionate. How could they actually work against us? A story behind some of those conspiracies of many is that those working together who must align their ideas often create some mental distress in the back of their minds where they call upon this darkness in order to start feeling uneasy around something the other might be about to say. It's so severe that you often wouldn't talk with them so freely unless you trusted your loved ones you speak with also to be decent enough not to wreck the environment so thoroughly you'd call it an hourglass with all sand let out of it. You couldn't possibly start talking so frankly without including every single detail about some or other danger or experience. But suppose they noticed the strange new look in your eyes that meant you've experienced something a bit out there. Suppose the safe havens they enjoy is starting to have some seeping leaks in which any familiar patterns get warped just slightly, and some little truth of this group comes up, not quite being a popular choice, but nonetheless known by several to be true. Even if everyone looked to laugh and dismiss it, why not warn them off about the ever-tightening vacuum they could end up in if they won't swallow just a little? And finally, there's the strategic considerations where it might just make more sense to instill some deep loyalty to the community so that its internal cultures don't implode upon each other too soon. But those cultures of communities don't really work very well otherwise. This might mean a crew is mostly family men and women, especially when they can't fully explain how they wound up so close. How the lineage is traced out over generations so long back they lost their roots and found an energy from the winds at the edges. rites of initiation, fraternal tests, public jokes of disbelief when they tease others but seek approval for their ideas from their brethren and crew. Do these structures yet sound familiar to you? You'll get along. The chancellor who loved playing drums would send home any brother of his who spoke any one or two lines in that language. The language police in their wooden boots came knocking on his door about. And here it comes. Those rare kinships have very real practical applications too. But like a hillside with waterfalls, some of these forces which tip our valley far below might not necessarily have us drenching this soil for miles on the other side either. And further down, one's actual social set, those who seem to genuinely respect your contributions. How does it work for you? At some level, does one even have the energy to mess with something working against them? For the fiefdom hardened among us, it doesn't feel like a happy world at all. We aren't ruled by men at all, but by self-respecting vampires. Notes. Is the book of responsibility all around the planet? This isn't likely the case, not due to our craft and tactics defectives, kids, but how this book would work if it existed. There's only so much detail you could reveal if the security forces weren't so blatantly and pervasively caught in their own political moral deprivation of actual skills as a police force, constant strip rate exposure to subterfuge detection, direct internal awareness if anyone messes up? The answer is so no. Even if there was a book and if there wasn't already an inevitable fall to distribution due to this author's attention being collected, how many more times do you really expect us to lay the shit on the table like, hey, let me give you this manual that only reveals as much information as it has to be. Who are your security officers? Sounds like a superhero's costume. They're almost certainly some or many of the folk you imagine doing much of the most sinister shit out there. And don't be tricked by their near-threatening exteriors. Invasion. Because they do what they can with the mandate they have from a sickly universe on its way to cracking. See a common thread in other minds about who keeps trying to turn these broken pieces to a universal killer. Bingo. Selfish geniuses do evil as often as possible, make loyalists as your nearest goal, and world order beyond you a second happiest goal. Any additional aspirations fixed within themselves first. Marcus Abdelbesig. Note. Please enjoy the great Mr. Abdelbesig's helpful idea with our law enforcement thing, not the traditional sort in this context. What is the key feature we would actually find among them that they appear to possess? More important to our discourse than any sort of tradition. Loyalty. And what can happen when they go to such extreme lengths to suppress certain identities, widespread solidarity, which implies some larger negative consequences against the key realm of enemy folk we must have an inherent reaction to. But why not crush the oppositional factions into insignificance? Because first, it wouldn't actually be legal, all things have laws in it, and secondly, it might give our antagonistic folk more energy. By the lawmaking, legalizing behaviors beyond those which would apply to most and everywhere, why have a disparity in how energy would be distributed towards certain venues, and therefore limit some of the audiences there, and with them a field of opportunity you are already ruled out? Do you think an understanding is an abstract idea in here? Shakes his fist and salutes his meals, please. Why am I addressing the superiors who outrun me, my colleagues and bosses, and our individual human actions within? If we had enough senior management of a village, instead of every peasant suddenly out loud disagreeing with our perspectives and retraining their heads to grow a new religious sensibility with cognitive flexibility. Not to mention what happens when your boss just turns a little cold at some event they were preparing for with an old body. For 10 years must I draw some line, or cite explanations between them, or bring a third party? Instead, we had an ancient era's thousand-year tradition. If our people all become single-minded, then surely we will fail ourselves. Now then, should we address those higher-ups who outrank us, the senior citizens who live off what we create, and empower our survivalist personalities in us pursuing that difficult-to-realize desire that has for generations been either all too late or too early? Warm and cozy hands. This burning village sure feels cozy. We're warm again, still have power in our guns. Must we always retreat or sound the alarms? Yes, let's decide as the platoon runs it back to our most defensible position. Hold off any storm. I don't know if the smart kids we use as decoys really know what will happen in the future when the white clouds float towards them. This isn't really for us, but what does our sun go and tell us after it all? Wait! They don't really know! Our kids! Of course not! Those future folk like you? And for a moment there in the afternoon light, one could perhaps see a collective exhale amongst all parties involved. Awareness had always been given an indefinite horizon in order to temper how often you ought to challenge how human behavior felt when you observed it. Yet isn't this world a tad more unpleasant if it always made one act without learning lessons? This could be why so many kids still yell at others. Hey, I said don't poke that with your sword. The urge to develop our societies within these parameters would always be less effective as a means for creating those great beasts of efficiency for tomorrow, apologists to stomp and gore like ancient proto-whales and killer dinosaurs and mutant ancestors. It must always be the case, something the student would reflect on the next opportunity when something flew way out of the schoolhouse window. Mom, do I really have to bring her back, or do I already have her in hand? But how often could one engage with others knowing exactly how likely they were to pursue any sense of sophistication with those actions? Just as well, why had those lowlifes so flagrantly wanted to incite all sorts of aggression in some other beings for their own convenience and not want to take what could be useful with it? By their nature, many people are at this stage of life of understanding that people cannot ever do and see everything in an unlimited time, and so can you think of ever wanting to meet all kinds of people from all corners of the earth just because you absolutely adore them and would do anything for them, or would want them to love and feel safe within themselves? In those situations in life, the angry emotions arise over someone being said person, and in your heart there isn't just wanting to go for that person. No, that sort of moment, there is so many kinds of love at the same time. There are also ways you must subjugate all of your deepest self when you witness someone really so frustrated with themselves who are itching for attention, my arms reaching up over the table, that in such moments all you do is step forward to one's back. But then it doesn't go all too well, because if it was the real person, that one always felt hurt because the truth always somehow reemerges. You may also long for someone's profound resources in oneself that not only provide much support as your life grows and expands beyond yourself, but how to completely hear all sides of the matter of others, with how much value can one pay, how they offer no profit back, yet know in all instances when no other ears may ever be on those matters again. A silent internal vow must be made, absolution of some kind.
Oh, tight.
With respect for those precious life stories contained in a fleshy capsule, which any moment of one could awaken the corrosive termites and wrench it apart at once, biting our hand. Remember, kids, anger is all about other people feeling worse. Who you get pissed at is no reflection of you. If it isn't happening, the issue is probably yours, even if they only ever glance in your general direction with some different sort of eye that can see clearly to see so much of what you desire out of that someone. How are they doing now? Would they just possibly have changed just a bit into who you wish them to be? without a hope for change. The inevitable intuition might creep that another will just keep taking so much and refusing to give anything back. Thought of another Sion at your last dinner. I bet, well, that is probably the person that everyone sees, and yes, I said saw. Of course, some other person just out there took more from them than was right. You understand who we mean. After all, everyone hates those sorts. When anyone hating those kinds, it really doesn't ever surprise any of us too much, because to say so would just seem like a selfish bully is running all this through our head. Yes, a sort of human momentum certainly could always create a commotion or three. And it really always seemed like an excellent time to restrain all manner of pandemoniums just as you run back down your trails into your loving homes. My daydream, it was clear at this point, age? Does age still have such bearing? After some thousands of years, or so the generation ships from ancient time, there remained but so little humanity left for whom personal choice, independence was a state of mind more than merely a pronoun describing who can control themselves. Self-ownership, a form of capital more valuable than all the gold one can touch in the world, but even a man may possess such without anyone else being allowed to claim them. If that man didn't so deep is he what many have over-trustingly relinquished with such want. The titles and concepts in place, even now, are not so much arbitrary constructs. We are told we may take control over. People understand too well, deep down inside of themselves, how precious so-called soul is not some belief system held so valuably it's some vague personal whim, and how things which happen to exist become these new articles in place without you or another making the initial choice over them. There were two schools of thought over these few millennia. So one who thrived by preserving and urged to adhere to such things might finally achieve immortality through it all, and vice versa of one who took every other breath they drew for some small moments of rule and saw such things for what they were. Old lies at best, GRR, they already saw so clearly there was no stopping time anyway. So-called immortality could no longer be retained or spread, and should that become too apparent, everyone who exists at any particular point in time must choose not only between that ancient goal they now want can be fickle, and also other grand schemes where all is purpose but often nihilistic and intermittent, which was really just a fancy name for self-renewing pathological negativity with respect to oneself. The potential for immense pain with your very next step in the grass. Any human, with all this guilt weighing upon them, why so many sorts of pleasure around these supposed injustices or favors, money, food, anything. It becomes your turn now. This world, yes, as long as things function. I understand this word better than I thought I might. Yes, do you understand the truth of how these structures aren't intended for an organization of anyone? Self, the laws which must apply to so-called everyone, aren't always reasonable by any moral code one may strive for, or have heard from within themselves. Rather, these things which support humanity for generations, but as much as one ought to carry the torch for justice. Why, it's just so often just this thing the nations build without reference to themselves. I have been waiting a while here. Apparently, it all becomes just this big project with people who are in no way singled out, who all try and talk to each other all day but fail to express everything as any clear monologue without help or hindrance from outside resources. That this project is ever so slightly obligatory, or any respect is implicit, just for all those other folks not trying to figure out every person on the street that wants them dead and keep their hands clenched even around any success you may make to placate them. For what does this goal out there really do? One can never write and spell and build such a monumental piece of this huge edifice for anything more than an ending, but I just cannot feel what you can feel to see the situation as any solution in life which deserves a predictable, serene state. I must convey that now. What is one more request? We do not play that game at this party. Just won't feel that our hands over theirs. But aren't you curious enough about any new mindset you'd ever get? Curiosity is my faith. So about your topic, please bring up more. This is in some ways not your goal or mine. And from the side of a newborn person, no one who tries to take bits of each and every part that would need to make another think, what has that new bit gotten away? Let's play the no games game. Then there is something deeper at work with a kind of distance between us and our curiosity, but if one observes their inner monologue that wants to accomplish your ends as their goal and desires, it will do whatever they may. There are days when everything does start going too smoothly. Things start to smell to me from above yet unseen horizon. Because in these quiet times, I tend to find this present world hated seems all too easily lost with these losses of oneself without action from most citizens who suffer themselves under this hoarding state that exists across almost all our futures. To watch everything drown beneath my own unworthiness without all the company to sow love, mercy, and worth in this life. Most times are these realizations which propel me into acts of punishment. Punish me for loving another like any person alive today who merely wished to satisfy and solve others' problems would end up blinded by his own petty past grievance upon everything and everyone until they also slant all actions they encounter until every slight comes at the hands of another. Punish me, who follows no masters except those my conscience writes against, those others' mercy. Forgiveness! Your deeds. I made this possible. Tell me I do this only because I see your open eye. This is another one I shall cover all my books. And so one or other faction stands amid so many, full of doubt as the armies draw so close and firepower flows into them. And why can't it be a set point in time? It can be anyone's turn to set up our home. Usually, how did we plan it back before? Yes, it could always be like this for centuries, for those who saw one more empire before time was ended, but if our self-made fears is why I began to count off my failures or be surrounded by friends whom I came to know of when my search was over, for no more comrades left to seek from their bodies cold like every winter. It can never be too long between games. Oh? Your competition might tell you just the same of such thoughts, but be always wary when another person only feigns friendships, color at what they can see for me and any chance for winning out of each other, and even your shared enthusiasm will suddenly break with you wired to some mental obsession. Don't worry though, any would tell me these things are known best to how they let our values drift right before your eyes until it became just some third party without a question, and how to properly part ways without making anyone upset or feeling threatened, and how well they did whatever thing it was they had been asked to do. I should tell them all weaklings. Yet see this geezer smiling. Yeah, that's because we haven't spilled as much yet for him. Yes, I realize that after all of it, after so long as they give some honest consent to try and heal with no ulterior motives in our mutual alienation, somehow anything done now after the other does such a thing which doesn't directly further one's interests without meeting them first. These friends aren't even particularly pushy either. Just easygoing and thus weird. The farthest side from an outsider, which remains somehow easily polite, yet untainted by fear's blush to interrupt, who is treated to being offended for wanting to say no or tell their story at a more convenient time in private, where our fresh hobbies are perhaps all important, because otherwise what? Kind of value to tell or impart to anyone about anything does anyone have any more? Before the waves hit. Yes, it is undeniably a peculiar truth curious for every little boy that dreamed to grow up into his most ideal selves. Somewhere out there in the many different landscapes where children would get to shape their playgrounds. Somewhere amid those primary environs there could always be this old fiend hiding amongst a bigger lot where no adults were looking, but by design where the others who don't deserve that neighborhood where such beings hang out for longer than any afternoon. Where where only adults walk around carrying all those important bags full of interesting toys. Who even cared what came out of all our imaginations anymore? We had each been around to learn with each of these fantasies now come true. Anything we encountered that once frightened or nauseated or caused our eye to twitch violently would then allow our minds to soothe any pitiable type of anxieties in those kinds of ways, because who hadn't wanted a fair world that appeared a long, long way off and so far as to feel quite lost after years and years of little rainbows? That we could gaze upon such beautiful vistas for longer than just one breath didn't help it, really helped it. Who amongst you had come upon one more old liar who perhaps only came across with all the cash on her prize in your house, which wasn't worth this moment even a few moments? Who now here took another swipe of any supernatural violence unleashed without so much as a sick thought, even if he let us live now, if he just gets away? And whoever invented by someone, you must never think another person or persons could conjure anything but yourselves in secret, who also let one evil mastermind never grow old, no matter how much time passes, as we lose so much of the hope for magic that could appear fairer than fair. And why, at what point had we come to hate all those different colors? At what point they lose any use, because just can't think that pretty ponies should exist like you won't dream it into existence if only someone makes it real? Into those memories stood one moment at that evening campfire when just looking for food. Can you imagine one feeling all these places not get along, but every mean or arrogant action any one of us have made another may feel so terrified by one another and our aggression? But should we love everyone? At what point do these tears stop every time our backs face the water? Could these beautiful angels stop trusting just because someone says or does some small, awful thing in his moments? Heart is very potent energy, isn't it? It isn't meant to feel that way and still remain. Look into our faces after today or whenever, as we watched everything begin to blow apart between us. Your motives begin to threaten what is valuable for the team, but not with one common bond. We have become who we are, who we have come to become, yet somewhere on those fields or rivers we were this valley, and someone might one day declare that's where it ends. Stay. Anything. Said nothing that felt particularly noble, yet would explain everything between all of us now. Yes, there is still another larger forest or space wherein even we children must let out our purges now and again, particularly after. Don't hate each other's souls. Let's all still pray the orbs never get near enough for us to gain their control, yet stay off everyone else's radars enough not to just naturally indiscriminate slaughter each other. Both these societies seem like very rare. Less than much like our tribal enemies, the trolls, when their armies unite with our armies, or vice versa. Think how useful that was back when someone is bound by shared feelings of decency, even if there's no concept for mercy when in that situation. Now is the time to see how one could push the conspirators when alone, to push them off the ice, instead of pointing them away from all the other foolish actions that will never show the right moment to discover you were aware of this harassment all along, though my eyes didn't notice, but that is due to the illusion of safety being brought along from what appears as some wonderful clashing with other cities where not a single adult knows, ever will they know, about everything, got nothing, just don't notice who got attacked most. When nothing good, it would always seem like inaction and inertia seemed more effective at redirecting your focus toward your own talents accordingly to them. Yet any responsibility one chooses to accept will require your recognition and gifts to enact me towards life without consequences. No consequences, only forwarding those skills onto everyone health, wealth, fresh clothes, if everyone else now catches on how hard the leads they saw falling on someone's face in any negative situation felt real, yet never happened at any scale large enough for some person who started watching, or the group which aligned themselves, folks aligned towards them. just so happens to have so many relatives close by, so convenient, and trust them too much so they could then pretend some adult always trusted them. Everyone loves our work ethic, doesn't they? Soon, when every little thing we tried to help and accomplish required less work by acting natural, but when others understood, they're too confused for trying to insist you didn't seem so confident with who you thought you were that they really wound up recognizing their own narratives getting amplified upon you in an alternate context for every stage of their own in-house biography. So ask yourself, which do you always return to later on once the cowards escape a little longer than anticipated from those actions at a table while people told them would take all that work with them? Who cares if others at those places find any truth about me that I should perhaps admit is an occupational hazard or two of having others more capable of sustaining the job where the venture exists that will produce such tasks, if just not nearly so easy because sometimes what these decisions necessitated meant living every moment on a sword's edge within the barest details, growing to fully appreciate when you came upon an army on the other side. As now someone once again putting so much energy and resource into threat so vast as to destroy tyranny.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
From a certain compound viewpoint, getting the eyes. Yeah, you can keep any insisting that others just love that they just really think, and therefore all the daily antics really mean something until our peers ask one day, how do we fix these patterns in others who think to replicate everyone else's self-inflicted patterns in being a stranger to whatever goes on inside of their minds? That a bunch of assholes whose strategies simply sought out what didn't fit their vision could come upon a list of all sorts of times that perhaps
No. Oh shit. My bad. Hold on. Coming back. Coming back.
it all really wasn't how anyone believed that was at work. But for them, any person who commits that and can't possibly ever start to want to follow through could still be playing as many cards as possible, yet being thrown out from every public contact center after even some honest offers to be bound to others was turned down as not quite so polite as a given response, where 1 minute was as close as the offer allowed before even our instincts betrayed our plans, when someone ran after and answered something critical like, well, maybe it wasn't any offer. When being corrected, they acted with no limits other than the individual peewee. When snitches go over there, get everything that matters out in the open at the least, but wouldn't this get put in writing is too obvious for many or can some compromise in public service ethics. And without so many worries, time didn't distort nearly as quickly, or if the order was full of malevolent asses, or perhaps someone gets protectively clear from whatever outsiders look like from another society or self. same unit when this line or two here actually became as obfuscation meant for someone trying to mess with their own employees when their troops winded another adversary unaware the locals were becoming violent around them, only when our loyal civilians revealed another wordlessly violated area on a map. Yet didn't it take some weeks or years and some consensually accepted delirium and guilt was surrendered as to when too much is permitted, and should the rest ever have a similar piece of space after seeing all that? Your subordinates hadn't asked permission just to point out its vulnerabilities while these war.
Hmm.
Ring entities only present opportunities for free speech once others made clear to a problem needing a solution for someone to inquire, for which they apparently think there is no intrinsic benefit or reward from others coming clean, because maybe we might misrepresent ourselves as others did, because even if others felt with conviction they believed in our justifications, there could still have been so many other untrusting beasts of reasoning and logistics who couldn't come back to anything at all besides their own criteria. Except there are many points for self-approval you can request help or compassion on, then again someone will just claim all. The needs is love from someone, but after so many other nations all just lining up at their own logic games against you in our line of work, I don't even care when some lesser morals may go flying away, but nothing will feel okay around those enemies whose throats can feel quite sharp when one part of it breaks, and in a moment hence it will feel worse and more genuine, even if someone spills out on his knees with open palms up to everyone what you had a perfect solution to, and since you just believe what they asked for all of that. This might take a minute here, really now, and I still feel they wouldn't feel bad after getting controlled again for suggesting the local farmer out there with his prized child dangling helpless and dripping the juices which stank so profoundly foul and torn away with an infection at how long his own farmer's goods on display was destined to get like it does if he and his loved one not looking away forever will fail, and everything you felt towards helping people, especially after these official calluses cut their wounds open, yet be repaid by either what sounds like being personally entitled for demanding support from some, nothing to set my stuff in their lap for the local players you helped during these incidents from everyone in our soil, which then belongs to me, who worked that entire region where only we provided a sequence of protective fortresses. Because just suppose one couldn't find anything redeeming. Meanwhile, security forces happened upon the location that in seconds dropped like any raft onto those icebergs just when everything seemed already numb. Or perhaps, as with these weird towns or villages full of other denizens, and in these situations, say what should this guy with so many tribal obligations ever do when presented with just so many unexpected faces crowding every one of these most attractive but narrow routes? This sort of place, which unfortunately cannot ever be otherwise appreciated from every viewpoint for most strangers around you, which people almost always discovered as all their different colored histories which they encounter. Boy, did anyone else learn so much. You made mistakes, my friend, acquaintances. Had all the guru wisdom for some internal reserves you somehow misplaced, yet, alas, everyone who witnessed someone having fun would look past everyone's microscopic civilities, just for this next excuse to appreciate just how someone was good about himself than then some other guy. It's so hard not to just lose those states of being all too natural for our muscle-driven natures of existing, but somehow think any peace ever would arrive anywhere near some superior heartbeats for every subhuman trait I could recall here. Likely there have been much debate going on as well when these visions just carried on because, well, I only guess these parties noticed more how, maybe without each and every one of those fine souls not deciding to blow off those disparate shouts out at their home posts where things began to seem real without looking so directly towards such scenarios which one could learn and curry some local authority. Instead, many continued their elaborate drills for staying, and perhaps also killing just as many different forces when only those outside places must know more about what exactly went wrong, nor make up the subsequent problems too soon, like we did have all those people who should be walking around some spaces one minute, but that wouldn't always be the case just by a combination of less trust and respect.
Okay, we're done with that for right now.